Good afternoon. This is Dr. B, and this is a special session that we was happy to be able to organize with two valedictorians that I worked with when I was mentoring them in their doctoral programs. Back a ways, they didn't have gray hair at all then, and they still don't have gray hair, from what I can tell. At this point, except for me, though I came in with gray hair as such, but Dr. Amarato, this is Dr. Rogers Amarato. I'm sure I'll let her introduce herself in a moment. And Dr. Kim Liccato will be along after she takes care of some issues back at her day job. When I decided to do this, I did this for a couple of reasons. First of all, Jackie and Kim, if I can call them that, are experts on what happened or is happening or might even be beginning to be happening in Finland. And since Finland is a model school that we've talked about in terms of modeling practices for leadership, I was pretty certain that we could consider the things that they brought up that we'll have lessons for you. And I would also tell you that I didn't make Jackie promise me this, but I'm sure she's going to say yes. If you have questions for either of the two people, I will be happy to send them over to them. And then I got to stop paying them, so don't ask them too many questions because they're doing this for nothing. All right, Dr. Rogers Amarato, would you please introduce yourself, and we'll take it from there.
Sure. I just recently retired in June from public school as department chairperson of a world language department, and then transitioned over to be a methods teacher at Stony Brook, which I'm currently doing, enjoying that aspect of the next phase. I did my dissertation with Dr. Bernardo on, it really dealt with leadership and what does leadership look like in high performing schools based on the results of the PISA scores. Kim, who hopefully will join us, did her research on what do teachers in high performing schools show, demonstrate, and how are they prepared for that position. So we kind of looked at the same thing, but from two different angles. During our time with doing our dissertation research, we had the opportunity to go to Finland and spend some time there. And for me, that was life-changing. That made me change my viewpoint about many things dealing with education. And one of those things in particular was, I kind of consider myself a hypocrite because some of the things that I used to do, I now wouldn't even dream of doing after spending some time in Finland. One of the things that struck me the most, though, was how well educated the teaching staff is. And their research-based approach to training their teachers provides the teachers and the administrators an opportunity to always be current and to always have the students first. So the concepts that we deal with of special ed is embedded in their system seamlessly. They don't have to go out to have IPAs and have the arduous tasks that it takes for a student to be classified because it's already embedded in their program. That's one of the huge findings that I saw, and it's because of how the teachers are trained. So from the very beginning, their programs, first of all, teaching in Finland is considered to be one of the highest professions, right there with doctors and lawyers. They're well regarded in the public, which is a little bit of a change of what we're dealing with here. I believe post-pandemic that is still in play. Their program starts from the very beginning. There are teachers from day one when they enter their college program, and they go through a master's program that is heavy on research and heavy on experience. So they're working with and in schools and with students almost from the get-go. That's
great. I'm smiling. Yeah. Let's just drop it 1 second for a moment. I'm not sure if all of my students are familiar with the PISA word. So if you could just explain where that comes from.
Sure. PISA is part of the UN, and it's one of the exams that is given, and it's an option for every country to rate the student's performance at the 8th grade level. And it really deals with critical thinking skills. And so when I was doing my research, Finland, Singapore, and Toronto, Ontario, Canada, actually scored in the top 5 countries with the students performing at that high level in critical thinking skills. So it's not so much a content, it's a process test. There's lots of controversy about that. There's lots of controversy about who's tested in various countries. But after you dig through all that, the scores speak for themselves about what their students can do in critical thinking skills. And I think that's kind of what got me motivated to do more research, was to see the direction that they were going in with that, and forcing the student, almost, if I can use the word forcing, to take ownership of their own instruction as early on as elementary school. And an example of that is Dr. Licato and I were sitting in one of the schools having lunch with, I think they were probably equivalent to third or fourth graders. And in Finland, everything, it's sustainable. So they have trays, they have regular glasses, forks and knives, and the students from the very beginning are trained to bring their trays back and to handle all of that. And what happened was one of the two little girls dropped a glass. And Kim and I were ready to get up and start helping. There's glass all over. These kids little. What are they going to do? And the teacher said, no, sit. And the principal said, no, sit and watch this play out. And what we saw was the teacher of the two young girls say to them, so what do you do? How are you going to solve this? And we didn't understand the language, but we see the two girls talking, and the principal's translating for us. And the girls were discussing. They were problem solving how to fix the problem that they created. And as they went through it, they were given the opportunity to problem solve all the way through. So the two girls, you see one of the girls run and get a broom and comes back, and they sweep it together. And of course, they're being supervised, sweep it together. And now they both look down and realize they have nothing to pick it up. So again, the teacher steps in and says, so now what do you need to do? Girls go through the whole communication, and ultimately it ends where everything's cleaned up and put away. But it was on their part, and they worked through it each time with a little assistance, a little probing from the teacher, but they solved the problem and they took ownership of it. And that was a theme that we saw spiraled through every school that we had an opportunity to visit.
That's great. One word I think I'd apply to that is empowerment.
Mm-hmm. Ownership.
Yeah.
Yep, definitely.
And yet the teacher would also have to have had that mindset to realize that A, they should be empowering, and B, that they should know how to empower.
Right. And sometimes this was one of the changes in my head that took place, is I would jump in to solve the problem, to move the lesson along, to help the students out, where I was really depriving them of an opportunity to problem solve with my guidance. And for me, that was a big shift in my mentality, where it was less about giving the answer or correcting the student rather than providing the student with, well, why do you think that? What led you to that conclusion? How did you come up with the answer? Tell me the process.
How is it? Does it relate among each other, among the students as well, peer to peer? They still, without a teacher's prompt, would they be likely to do the same thing?
So yes, at the high school level, we were there when each high school was trying to take part in an environmental sustainability issue, where they all had to figure out something to do to help with that initiative. So there was two students outside when we arrived with a garbage bag, picking up garbage just on their own. That was something that they decided to do that would help that endeavor. The principal of that building explained to us that you're going to see different things going on in regards to that while you're here. And this was why, because they're all leading towards, I think it was a national cause at that point in time that they were striving to receive accommodations or accreditation for. So it was very interesting. The other thing about the schools in Finland that I found startling was there's not a lot of stuff on the walls. They're not decorated from top to bottom. You see student work up. You see it relevant to that time period because it was in September and October. So it was definitely dated September and October. It wasn't up there for different months. And then you see maybe something that's going to help the student, maybe a chart, but the room is not bombarded with an overflow of material. I found that interesting too, coming from a world language background. I would cover every single space on my wall to give the students an opportunity to have that all there. When I asked about that, the response was, when they ask for it, when the student needs it, we'll supply it, which was, again, a very different mindset for me, because I wanted to be proactive and give them everything that I thought they needed beforehand, rather than, again, going back to the students taking ownership of what they needed.
I'm going back to the premise that you talked about before. I'll use the word that you were implying, the capacity building of prospective teacher candidates. I mean, right out of high school, as we all know, they go, I think, with the top 10% of their graduating class. But whether they still do or not, I'm not sure. But it sounds like that's what they always kind of wave their flag about. And the intentional expectation to train their teachers to inquire and be collaboratively reflective. That's a word I just used literally before you and I got on today in terms of understanding that. So did you see that in action?
When we asked about what happens with student teaching, we were brought into a classroom where we got to observe, it was probably like 5th or 6th grade, and we observed 2 teachers. It looked like a co-teaching model, and one teacher was more involved with a particular student than other students, where the other teacher was giving everybody equal amount of time. And we just observed and watched and saw it play out, and this teacher redirecting at times and giving encouragement to students, but particularly with this one student. Afterwards, they said, the principal of that building said that what we saw there was the beginning of an analysis of the student, because the teacher had come together with the principal and somebody that specializes in special and said, I'm starting to see something. Can you come in? And so from that point on, the person who specializes came in and they worked together. The principal also came in to view the student. Now immediately the student's getting services because the system is so comfortable with the classroom teacher analyzing the specific needs of every student and recognizing an issue right away, that they're going to start that rather than wait the however long it takes us in New York to get that process rolling. They started immediately. The philosophy that was that we saw and was told to us was, at some point, every single kid has special needs. And I can remember myself sitting in a chemistry class going, oh my goodness. And just feeling that like I did not have a clue as what was going on in chemistry. And I think at some point in our lives, all of us can relate to that, where we need extra support. Now, again, I needed it in chemistry for a short period of time. Students need it maybe their whole career. But the bottom line is, I didn't get it because no one recognized it. I had to go out and ask for it. Where if the students that are displaying that behavior, and then the classroom teacher immediately sees something and has the resources right there to invite other teachers and the admin to come in to see it right away, it's immediate, it's seamless, and there's no stigmatism to it, because at some point everybody needs a little something. So that part was amazing to me.
Yeah, it isn't as though the principal convened a child study meeting in the Western world to hold hands and kumbaya this whole thing.
They do have meetings built in. Their schedule is, there are more times for the adults to meet than a typical public school setup here. So there is that collaborative effort where all of these things are discussed and everybody has input to it. It's readily available and easier to get the right people together at the right time. It's built into their weekly system, is what I should say. It's not part of a faculty meeting at the end or trying to get the right people before or after school.
Right, so the structure of the instructional day was not, let's go secondary for a minute. We both talk secondary, 5 periods.
No. The teaching load was less. I would say three, maybe 4, but with time in between. And their teacher centers were set up in ways that were very conducive to those structured and then semi-structured. What I mean by that is we're having a cup of coffee and we're starting to talk about X, Y, and Z. It was very engaging. It was very complimentary to having that one-on-one communication with another colleague, or sit down and have that communication with everyone who's teaching a grade level or course level. The other interesting thing is, when you're an administrator, you're not an administrator for life. You cycle in and you cycle back.
Help us understand that.
So you can aspire to become the building principal or the lead administrator in a building and do it for a short period of time and then come back into the teaching world. Also, there was models where you were teaching a class and still the leader of the building, which I think is a great thing, because with all the changes that have happened recently over the past 10 years, just dealing with technology and student systems, having then administrator or leader of the building in touch with what the reality is for the teachers in using those new platforms and learning how to use even Google Classroom or a new gradebook system. They're working hand in hand together. It's not top down. It's okay. So we all have to do this. All right, let's unpack this together. Very different mentality.
How about, I forgot what I wanted to ask you. I'm going to jump to the question. I think that my class would probably ask you. Um, and I know you and I have talked about this. I remember back all the way back to your dissertation, and just a few minutes ago, uh, they have ENL population, or not an ENL population, an FNL population, I guess is a better way to put it.
Yeah.
Much the same way they would work with potential special education students, I presume.
So that is always something that's brought up when I say that I've done research in Finland, and people counteract that with, well, Finland, everyone's the same. And while that might be easy to look at when you initially take a look at Finland, the reality is they're very much dealing with migration, poverty, various languages. Syrian refugees have been coming to Finland now for the past decade or so. They're dealing with transient populations as much as we do. So in the capital of Finland, at one point, they were dealing with 30 different languages. 30 different languages. Ontario, Canada exceeded that. They were dealing with 40 different languages. So that portion of both of the Ontario, Canada, as well as Helsinki, is exactly replicates New York State to me, and definitely Manhattan, and some of what's going on Long Island, where there has to be that focus on foreign language instruction. Now, the good news is in Finland, as in most European countries, there is a focus on everybody learning more than one language. We did not have, neither Kim nor I speak the language of Finland, Finnish. We both are Spanish and French. Everybody we spoke to spoke English. Everybody knew English because that's very much embedded into their program from day one. We sat in a kindergarten class and spoke English to the kids in the kindergarten class. They practiced their English with us. So Finland is definitely dealing with many of the same things that seem to be huge roadblocks or impediments to our public school system here in New York State.
Is that part of the structure of the day, Jackie? I'm sorry, I meant to. Okay, you go with your thought first. Go ahead.
Okay. The other thing that we definitely, both of us sat back and said, oh, that's a very interesting problem, is that in Finland, there is one set of requirements that every single teacher, every single administrator has to go through and adhere to and meet requirements for teaching, and then for their content area, and then when they want to go on to administrative level. In New York State, although we all have the same certification at the end, we have the program that we receive is really dependent on where we go. If you're attending X school or Y school or an upstate school or a Long Island university, the education you receive and the practical analysis that you'll be invested in is going to be radically different. That's not the same there. Every single educator is given this, let me say, given the same path to follow and the same research at the end that they're involved in and the same type of experiences. And so that makes a quality level significantly higher than what we are able to do here. Because again, every university that a student attends, a potential teacher attends, is going to put their own twist on it.
Yeah, so I'm going to say the four-letter word here, and that would be that American colleges' response to that, whether it be on Long Island or in New York City or wherever else across New York State, would say, well, we have a certification exam, and that assures us that everyone's met their standard. What do you think?
Passing an exam is easier to do than, you're already laughing because you know what I'm going to say. Passing an exam is easier to do than all coming from the same mindset.
Yes.
So if you have
there's a dissertation
shared mindset, right? If you have a shared mindset and shared experiences, then we all are starting at a point where I can give respect to every single person who walks into my room and say, you know, Jackie, so-and-so is displaying processing problems. Let's do something about them. And it happens like that.
Mm.
Listen, I'm the first one to say that New York State teachers and teachers across all of the United States do a tremendous job with what they have. I also believe that public education in the States does a tremendous job with what we have. But my question late in my career, looking back on, is this the best that we can provide with everything that we have, everything that we can offer? Is this the best of what we can provide for students moving into this portion of the 21st century?
Well, you both know the answer to that.
Mm-hmm.
But it brings me back to I'm still concerned about the English, the language issue.
Mm-hmm.
So they're dealing is a bad verb, but they're working with children who are coming from different, like Syria, as you said. They're working from children's needs in the same classroom. They're not pulling them for program X and program Y and program Z. They're all working together, and the teachers and the administrators have evolved a common game plan to work with those children because of the culture of the school and of the country, for that matter, to collaborate in a different way than we kind of think we need to collaborate here in the States.
Correct. They're all on the same page.
Yes, I got that. That's. How do you can't answer this in the next minutes we have remaining, but how are we able to do that? Well, or will we be able to do that? Well, let's go back to the pandemic thing you talked about before class started. So you thought that the pandemic, you were aware of things that the pandemic may have, how it may have affected Finland education, or that whether it is we're able to just purge through it. I'm asking.
Well, initially, I think it was a free-for-all, just like we had to deal with here. And then they brought the students back much quicker than we did. And they also had the capability to go virtual at the higher levels quicker. That was something that was embedded already, that we saw a lot of, where we were just starting. New York State was just starting to go one-to-one devices. Some districts were further ahead than others. That was already in play. So again, the mentality is we're providing opportunities for students that are real world, real scenarios of what they're going to be performing in and functioning as adults.
Well said. Well, that goes back to our, Bernardo's favorite word, the future word. Which I haven't really hit this class with real hard yet, but I will.
Futuring.
Futuring is that I think you told me they have futured for the migration of populations and the expectation of technology more consistently, more deeply than we have. I'm asking.
Yes. And so I kind of think of what I saw in Finland and the way that the communication works from teachers, administrators, stakeholders, the government education department reminds me of a data analysis circle, where it's that continuous flow of information, the continuous input of information, where not one entity has more influence or power than the other. There is that whole circle of, we're seeing teachers, we're seeing this, or the education department talking with what the business world needs and saying, okay, the business world is saying students need to come out with an understanding of, I'm going to say, Excel. And how can we put that into the programming, and where does it go in? And then it comes back around, and there's conversation. There's constantly conversation and revision of what's most important for these students to exit from the schools to be able to become productive citizens, or to find what they want to do next. It doesn't mean that we're going to produce a engineer, or we're going to produce a hairstylist. It means that they're going to have the skills to be able to do that. And I think that's different. It's not that they can do math, it's that they can process math.
Well, I get the critical thinking thing. I mean, that's clearly, if they're wrapping their flag around that, then they don't have to worry about those kinds of things. I'm thinking about another class that I have, not this class that we're directing this particular video to, that was lamenting greatly. I was going to use a different verb. I'll go with lamenting greatly, how things have been for them the past 3 or 4 years. And I understood that. I mean, I haven't became K-12 world every day anymore, but I can understand the expectation of a good teacher. But what I was really feeling badly for them was the lack of my perception of their perception of the lack of a collective sense of futuring and of anticipation that could only be dealt with if you think about it in terms of like not Maslow. I'll go with Maslow for the only one I can think of a sense of expecting something differently from teachers to begin with, rather than we're going to add in an SEL curriculum. Instead of saying SEL can't be taught 30 minutes a day, it has to be part of the day, and this is how we can try to do it. It's another thing people have to do, like fire prevention, safety, or whatever else is out there. that make any sense?
Yeah, without a doubt. And you know that term I've heard a lot Maslow during these past couple of years, Maslow before Bloom. But how do you extract them from each other?
Hello.
How do you not commingle them? I don't know how to do that. I think that maybe there's an emphasis on Maslow more so now than probably before, but you cannot separate the two. There's no way to separate the two. But how can you take the social emotional issues and intertwine that with the critical thinking skills of Bloom and create a package for students that they can work with in a tangible way? I don't know.
I attended a conference this past Saturday that woman was she was talking about a critical race issue, but that's not the term, it's the incorrect term. And she was out of the city, and she asked, the first question she asked was, tell us about the teacher who shouldn't use this word, was my word, who you hated the most and why you hated that teacher. It wasn't hard for me to do that one personally. And then tell me about the teacher whom you learned from the most. And that wasn't hard for me to do either. And the third piece was tell me about the teacher whom you cared about the most. And 2 and 3 kind of went like that. The teacher who I hated the most, and went over with the car if I saw her today, didn't care about me or anyone. Well, maybe not, certainly not me. And I never got over that. That's it's one of the reasons why I became a teacher, to be a 180 from what she was about as such.
That was something also that I think hit me when I was in Finland too. You know, content is very important. What I teach, what everyone teaches, especially at the high school level, is exceptionally important. And as a teacher and planning for that, I think it's the world. For me, whatever it was I was teaching was most important. And I can't, you know that the students always think it's most important. But watching the interplay of all of that in Finland, how those social emotional skills, how the critical thinking skills were so interwoven seamlessly into content, and the content transcended then the course. So here's another example. It was like 7th graders, I think, and it was a technology course, but it was, so what they had to, their goal was to make toys. So we asked, why are you making toys? Because they researched a community that needed toys in the hospital to give to give to kids that were sick during the holidays. So what they did was they went out and did the research. Then they came up with, well, what kind of toy? Because you can't give a stuffed animal, you can't give this. So they created a toy that they thought would be fun, and then they did soup to nuts on the whole thing. So again, that's bigger than just sitting in a wood shop making something.
Hello. And with that, I'm going to stop right there because we could go on forever, but we will have other lives to lead today. And so I'm going to cut you off. But I would imagine that we're going to get some good questions from this class. It's a great class. That we'll have questions. And I can't begin to thank you enough. Please.
Anytime, Doc. Anything for you.
Thank you very much. You know how much I appreciate that. Give my best to Kim and tell Kim we haven't let her off the hook.
Okay. All right. Thanks and have a great day.
Soon. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Great job. Thank you.
Bye-bye and good luck to all of you. Bye.
Okay. Let that marinate, folks. When I'm talking to myself as much as I'm talking to you, let that marinate. How does what you say about a so-called exemplary school system, a national school system, how does that translate to this ideal multi-age classroom approach that you would like to put in place, given the fact that so many of you asked questions about really making this real? I'm talking to myself by saying, first you have to change the culture. It's a saying that Peter Drucker once said. Peter Drucker is an organizational theorist. And his saying was, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So if I'm going to have tons of great strategies to put in a multi-age classroom in place, that's fantastic. But first I start with the culture, and I can't start with the culture until I know what the culture is. And that goes back to needs assessment. So ponder this, and I'll ask for your response to this somehow or another, but I'm not sure how I want to do that quite yet. It's unfortunate that you didn't get a chance to hear from Dr. Liccato, but we'll find a way to bring her into the act down the line. So I appreciate your attention, and I hope that this was of great value to you. What's to me? Take care.